Hello, welcome to Wunder Insights webinar. For those watching, thanks for joining us. I'll start with a quick round of introductions so you understand why we're here, what we're going to talk about, and who we are. I'm Purnima. I work in marketing at Wunder, and my focus is on engaging and getting into contact with prospects that are interested in our company's products and services. How about you, Frits?
Right. So my name is Frits. I'm head of product for Wunder Carpool. Been with the company for about 3 years, and together with the team here, we build a carpooling product.
That's cool. All right. So we're here today to talk about something really specific, where we work a lot with, or you work a lot with corporates that are thinking about how to keep their employees engaged. And specifically within those corporates, we have facility managers and real estate managers who are thinking about parking and the challenges with parking in corporate campuses or business parks. Can you talk a little bit more about what that pain is for them? Yeah, let's go from there.
Right. So maybe before I go into that pain, I need to explain a little bit what carpooling is. So
Sure.
Our product helps employees to share a ride from home to work and back every day. What we see is that often people drive alone and they come by a car, and this car occupies a parking spot for the full day. And if you only have a few people, that's okay. But for larger organizations, this quickly turns into a real pain. And this is a pain that we deal with. So when companies or organizations reach out to us, it's often because of a mobility need that they're having, and it's often also tied to parking.
Okay, all right. So what they're seeing it as is kind of congestion for parking spots and not a very nice experience for their employees.
Yeah, that's correct. So the organizations that we're working with are typically over 500 people on one site. And we see that even though mobility is maybe shifting, still a large percentage of these employees come to work by car. And every morning, all these people need to go on the parking premises, find a spot, and then also walk to their offices. And with carpooling, we believe we have something that could help reduce that hassle. And on top of that, so there's direct pains for the company related to just providing the appropriate mobility to employees, and also the time that is lost for people searching for spots or being congested around the business parks. But also it comes at an environmental cost. So there's CO2 emissions, pollution, all these kind of things just from cars running stationary in a congestion, or trying to find a parking space on premise.
Okay, so before we dig deeper into carpooling, which we're proposing as a solution to this, you kind of outlined a couple of things that corporates need to think about beyond just parking space. Could you kind of list out all those different pain points that corporates might have?
Right. So especially if you have an organization where a lot of people come to the same place, the first priority is to get these people to work in the first place, basically. Right. So you want to organize your mobility in such a way that all your employees can get to work in a convenient way every day. And if everyone comes by car, or a lot of people come by car, this might turn into a problem. Right. So it's not so easy to get hundreds or thousands of people every morning to the same place. And in a larger sense, this poses a threat also for organizations, because who would want to work for an organization where it just takes half an hour extra every day just to get to work? You have to stand in traffic jams. You don't know if there will be parking for you. This leads to additional stress. So typically, this is something you want to avoid.
Yeah.
Right. So there's the direct problem of the mobility itself. People cannot get to work, but also in a larger sense for the reputation of the company or the attractiveness as an employer. You want your people to get to work in a convenient way, and if it's possible, also in an environmental friendly way.
Right. Okay. So you've been working with Wunder Carpool on a solution that addresses some, if not all, of these pains that you've described. You've already touched on what carpooling is, for those that are not familiar with that term or understand it differently. maybe you can talk a little bit about how y'all are solving the problem now through this solution.
Right. I think to answer that question, it also makes sense to take a little step back. So Wunder Carpool started some longer time ago as a B2C product. So we were helping people in cities like Manila or New Delhi or Rio de Janeiro to get to work and back through carpooling. And over the time, since 2016 that we've been working on that, we really put a lot of emphasis on building a product that works for the people. Right? So it just supports the habit of carpooling. It's one app where people can basically indicate when they are going to get to work, if they're taking a car or if they want to be a passenger. And through that system, we managed to get a lot of people, like hundreds of thousands of people, to carpool every day. We took a lot of cars off the road. So the principle of carpooling, it's simple. However, to make that into a digital platform is not straightforward. And it took us quite some time to figure out what is the perfect setup to get people to use the app, but also to let them keep using it. We succeeded in that, and in 2019, in the middle of last year, we started to take this app and also offer that to companies, to large organizations, and we started to combine this with parking. So in the B2C setup, the incentive for people to start carpooling was one, to basically have a convenient way to get to work, but for the drivers to be compensated with money. In the corporate context, we see that parking and just a guarantee that you can park somewhere is a very strong incentive to encourage people to go carpooling more than money.
Okay.
So for the corporate setup, we take that app that is working very well for carpooling, and we basically combine that with privileged parking spaces that are offered by the company. And for a driver offering a carpool, we promise that if you take someone with you, there will be a spot for you reserved. And this does a couple of things. It gets the convenience to the driver because they know that they can just go to work, they know where to park, and these parking spaces are often also in good locations, so you don't have to walk far. For the passengers, they could leave their car at home, so they could save the money of that you normally would spend on fuel, and they have the convenience to get to work without having to drive, while socializing with colleagues. And for the company, the benefit there is very clear. If a lot of people share the car when going to work, you need fewer parking spaces to accommodate for everyone, but also there is less congestion, and people can park closer to work, so you lose less time for your employees on their way to work. And that makes it so that also as an employer, you become basically a better place to work.
Okay. You mentioned that you've seen some successes being a B2C carpooling company in the past. And I imagine that you also had some challenges running those operations, and that's possibly also informing how you work with partners now in this new version of yourselves as a B2B software provider for carpooling. Does that become part of your offering then to clients that you'll work with?
So I think the product in itself worked really well, also in a B2C. One of the things that is essential for a good carpooling system is the incentive design. And that's where it gets hard in the B2C. So if you want to monetize on money transactions, that might be challenging, and it also offers friction, right? People don't like to give a percentage of their earnings away to the platform if they can also circumvent it. In the B2B context, I think all the interests are more aligned. So there's a direct benefit for the employer, but there's also a direct benefit for the driver and for the passenger. And this leads to a very sustainable situation.
Okay, all right. So you've mentioned that you're now in the process of like working with a couple of companies. When we chatted earlier, some big brands like Lufthansa and PwC were mentioned. Can you talk about those projects and how you support these companies in operationalizing their carpool?
Yeah. So every situation is unique. I think what makes what all these cases have in common is that when we start the conversation with the organization, there is a problem that they want to see solved, right? So either there's a parking problem, or like there's a lot of money being spent on external parking spaces that need to be rented, or the company wants to make an effort to basically make their mobility offering more sustainable. But typically it starts with a logistical problem. And what we do is that we go in conversation with the company to see what they want to see solved. And we look at the specifics of the setup. So how many parking spaces are available, how many employees are coming by car. Sometimes we run a survey to see what is the willingness or what it would be the initial group of carpoolers that would be interested to do so. And then we move up and we basically set up a pilot. So in a couple of months, we try to grow a carpooling community from 0 to a significant portion of the employees. And also we agree on a certain number of KPIs. So the company has a goal and we believe we can help serving that goal. And in these first months, we do everything we can with our expertise from how to do carpooling, both technically but also operationally. We support the company in achieving these KPIs. And that's also the moment at the end of the pilot when we can decide if this is something that makes sense for that organization. And from there, we can move to a long-term engagement where the company basically takes over the operations and we just support them in a more infrequent manner. And what we see so far is that it's working well, especially in the situations where there is a lack of parking spaces. People are really willing to carpool and use the app and ride with each other. And basically the parking pressure is alleviated by introducing carpool. And the nice thing is that this scales up, so you can get more and more people to join the network. And since it all goes through this digital platform, we have an insight in the kind of impact that we're having. And this goes beyond parking itself. So you can also see how many kilometers are carpooled together, what are the CO2 emissions that are being prevented, the pollution that is reduced. All these kind of positive side effects from introducing or solving your problem here are measured and can also be published in CSR reporting for the company. So that's a positive sort of side effect. And often we see that companies that introduce this, they come for the parking, but once it catches on, they also use this in press releases or again in CSR reporting.
Okay. Do you have any sort of so it sounds like parking, of all the pain points, parking is sort of the most compelling reason why corporates are turning to carpooling as a solution. Do you have any data around what benefits you all have been able to, or positive outcomes you had with projects?
In numbers, you mean?
Yes, in numbers. Yeah.
Right. So what we see is that we can make a parking situation typically up to 20% more efficient. Again, it depends a lot on the specifics of the company itself. So how many spaces are available for carpooling? How big is the problem? But in places where there is a problem and we can make a change, we see that this is significant. And if you keep in mind, like we work with large organizations, so they have a lot of parking spaces. Building new parking spaces or renting parking spaces is very expensive. So what we see in Western Europe is that a parking space to rent is easily between 50 and 150 euros per month. Creating a new parking location for a new office is about 30,000 euros. So it depends where you do it, if it's underground or overground, but these are significant costs. If you multiply that with the number of employees, the kind of efficiency improvements that we bring a noticeable cost saving just on that side.
Okay, all right. We have a question from the audience.
Yeah, so this one comes from Wolfgang. I think the last one is interesting.
Yeah, the second one. All right. So the question is, employees pool via a private car used by one employee, which will get a parking slot at work parking spaces. So I think it's to clarify how it would actually work if you have employees involved in a corporate carpooling scenario.
Right. I think that this is pretty much correct. So what this system is relying on is people with access to a car that use that to get to work. And in some cases, these are company cars that are just assigned to individuals, but typically they are private cars. And if you normally go to work by car, you can basically add your ride to the system, and this will become visible to others. And the nice thing that we're doing is that typically most of the people that enter the system, they are actually drivers. So what we do is that we look at all the people offering a ride, but we also match them with each other. So if we see that two drivers have a compatible route on a compatible time, it's possible that one driver could offer the ride to the other, and we ask the other driver if it's okay for them to leave their car at home that day. And you could alternate, you could vary with that. As a driver, you can also choose how many seats you're offering. So at least one seat, but you could go up to 3 or 4 seats depending on your car and your availability. But that's pretty much the setup. And then if you do a successful carpool, we can register that in the systems through various methods. So we could look at the location data, but we can also do some sort of handshake between passenger and driver. And with that, we can validate that the carpool is actually happening. And if that is actually happening, you get a parking spot with a number which you can find on the premise of the company. Typically, we look the evening before which carpools have been confirmed, and we give away the spots first to people that actually do a carpool. And if there's any spots remaining afterwards, we have a look to see if there's people that have been offering rides but they couldn't find a match, and we will give the remaining spots away to these people. So they show the right intention, they didn't do it all the way. However, we don't want any of the carpooling spots to be empty the next day. So there's typically a small percentage, a buffer that we keep to ensure that we can give a guaranteed spot to everyone who is carpooling, but then the rest will be given away in the lottery system.
Okay. So say I am now someone with a corporate that's thinking about the problems that the pain. I have the pain that you described. I now understand carpooling as potentially one of the solutions for it. I also have somewhat of an idea of how it might work in my particular setting. And you brought this up a couple of times, but I want to dig into that a little deeper. You said incentivization is important when it comes to a B2C scenario. Are there partners that you work with, or are there any recommendations you have when it comes to incentivizing in a B2B, so in a corporate carpooling scenario?
Right. So in a corporate setting, parking is definitely one of the most important incentives. However, there's other incentives that could be used, and it depends on what the company can offer and also what fits within the legal frameworks. So you need to be careful not to have extra income from the incentives that you're giving, but that's a bit of a technicality.
Sure.
But the system knows what's up, and you can do rankings. You can say, okay, the 50 best carpoolers of the month, they get a little perk. They can, I don't know, get a cup of coffee or lunch or whatever you feel is available to offer as incentive. So even if parking is not a big issue, there's other ways that people could be incentivized to do carpooling. And what we also see is that there is always a percentage of people, so between 5 and 20% in any organization, that is intrinsically motivated to do carpooling. So they want to do good, they don't want to be wasteful, they feel that it's good to share, and they engage with that already. Typically, when we enter an organization, there is always a group of carpoolers already, and these are typically small groups of people that organize themselves over WhatsApp or Facebook. The limitation there is that it doesn't reach the whole company, so the matches that you're making are maybe not optimal. And what we do is that we like to start with these carpoolers that are already there, onboard them on the platform, and then use that as the seed to grow the rest of the community.
Okay, all right. I think we won't actually be going into describing or showing the product here to respond to one of the questions. But I think there's another question around how participants are notified in case there is a delay in someone being picked up.
Okay. In the carpooling process, it's always double opt-in, right? So either the driver offers a ride and then as a passenger, you accept that, or the other way around. The passenger requests a ride and then the driver confirms that. So this is already arranged the day before, so you know who you're actually going to carpool with.
Yeah.
But then as soon as the driver starts, you notify your passengers that you're on your way, and you can choose to share your live location with the passenger. Right. So the passenger can make sure that they're at the pickup location at the right time, but you can also see if the driver is still a little bit further away because of traffic.
Right, you can track them basically.
You can track them, and on top of that, we also have a chat functionality. So as a passenger and a driver, you can communicate with each other. And if you have a small delay or something happened, you can notify the other party what's up, and then you can act accordingly. And if you choose to do so, you can also expose your phone number. But this is an optional option because not everyone is comfortable giving out their phone number, even to colleagues. But there's always a way to communicate and to notify the other party if something has changed.
Okay. One of the things that you touched on earlier is that carpooling can be a good way of building employee community. And since you've done that in a B2C context and focused kind of dedicatedly on creating that kind of community, what are you seeing happen with employees and their engagement using whether it's the chat function or any other way?
Right. So often the more curious employees come first, so they try something out, and if they have a successful experience with carpooling, they become ambassadors of the principle. Right? So they like it; it's working for them. They also get the incentive on top of it, and you see that from there, people start educating each other what it's like to be a carpooler. And since this is a network that just matches everyone that has a similar location and time. You get combinations sometimes in the organization as well that are unexpected. So you basically move out of your silo, and it might be the case. So one of our partners is PwC, and the partners in the firm, they are actually taking part in the system. They have their own reserved parking spot, but they take part in the system. And this is a way for people to basically be randomly matched with other people from the organization and have unexpected conversations. And what you see is that over time, this the carpoolers that work for you, that evens out, right? So if you are a good match for me to carpool with because you're on my route and you have a similar schedule, it's very likely that we start repeating rides together.
Right.
Also, the system allows for that. So we made functionality that basically creates rides for you every day. So I only have to accept or offer in order to do a carpool with you. And that way we get to know each other. And people go about this in different ways. Not everyone has to become friends always, but if this is working for you, then it's working for me. This is something that we're all benefiting from.
Yeah, this is, I guess, another way of you could think of it as another way of team building, right? It's happening
it's one way
in very small groups.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Since you are working with a couple of interesting clients, what are corporates actually worried about when they think about carpooling as an option for solving some of the problems that you described?
So I don't know if companies are worried. The thing is that carpooling in this setup is pretty new. So no one really has done this before. And it's only since recently that it's possible to do carpools this way, right? To think about it, it's not that long ago that everyone ended up having a smartphone with a good internet connection, with GPS, with enough battery to also use that. So carpooling done through a platform like Wunder Carpool, something that is done before, right? So it takes some convincing sometimes to get it started. And luckily, we have a couple of partners that really believe in carpool, that first step. And it also allowed us to together basically figure out how to do carpooling in a corporate context. And what we see now is that from these first cases, the first pilots that we run, we get some benchmark numbers, which makes it much easier to also talk to the more conservative parties to tell them about the benefits of carpooling. And there are true benefits to carpooling, and investment is relatively low. So it mostly takes some numbers to convince people to take a step. And then it depends on the individual situation if this is something that works or not. If you're in a place where you have unlimited parking and no one has a problem, then it might be hard to get people to adopt this.
Sure.
So some scarcity or some sort of pain point is needed for us to make this a success. But this is typically also something we discuss early on, even before we go into a project, to make sure that this is something that works for both parties. Yeah,
and I think as you identified, perhaps parking is the most compelling reason, but there are other equally important things or considerations like employee happiness and being a good employer or CSR that could factor into one of the reasons.
So it depends what angle you're having, and we can solve like multiple problems with one solution. If the angle is CSR, then we still need to have some sort of pain to solve. But typically, if you talk about these large organizations, mobility is challenging. If you have to bring a couple of hundred people to the same place every day,
Sure.
that is challenging regardless if people are driving cars or going by public transport or whatever. Right. So there's typically something that we can do.
Yeah.
But then our focus will also be more on the reporting side of things. And we can also help with that. Right. We can help you with internal communications, but we can also help you with structuring the data reports that then could be part of your annual reporting, for example.
Yeah, if I think about my own work day, it starts when I get on the train or whatever mode of transport I take to get to work. So if there's any way that might be a bit more enjoyable, then sure, I think I'd be happy about that for myself as an employee, as well as for like the place that I work at, to think of it. I don't see any other questions. I'm gonna wrap this up with one last question on whether you have any advice to companies that are seeing themselves in what you've described so far. What should they do next?
So we're always open to conversation. So I think the easiest thing is to just drop us an email. I can mention it. I think we should also just put it in the video later on, but you can reach us at carpool@wundermobility.com, and we will reach out to you. And from there, we basically take on the situation. We could do a product demo, and then depending on how fast you want to move, we can think about implementing a pilot or even just going to a long-term engagement from the beginning.
Okay, super. So if there are any corporates out there and people that are thinking about specific problems that we've described, and are now somewhat convinced that carpooling can be a solution, then reach out to us, and we will take you through the process of setting up your own employee carpooling program. All right, correct. Super. Thanks, Frits.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining. We're still online.